Hello and welcome to another brand new episode of Dingers and Stingers, the podcast that begs you to bear with us. We're not lying. We're talking NFC North today. All right. It's time for another installment of our division previews. And we are, like I said, we're talking about the NFC North today. Last episode, if you missed it, we did the AFC North. So go check that out. Matt and I had a fun time going through that division and talking about everything that pertains to that. But look, we're in 2025 here. We're looking forward to the next season. And here we are at our division previews. So let's tarry no further and let's get started. I'm Dallas, that's Drew, and that's Matt, by the way. Welcome. So, all right, so let's start with where we've been with this division. 2024, the season division standings ended like this. The Detroit Lions won the division with 15 wins and 2 losses. They lost to the Commanders in the division round of the playoffs. The second place team was the Minnesota Vikings with 14 wins and 3 losses, who lost to the Rams in the wild card round of the playoffs last year. The Green Bay Packers finished third at 11 wins and 6 losses, also made the playoffs, and also lost in the wild card round to the Eagles. And then at the bottom of this division, the Chicago Bears finished with a lowly 5 wins and 12 losses. Needless to say, no playoff appearance for them, but certainly had some space for an interesting offseason. So that's how this division ended up last year. Lots of changes in this division, all of which we're going to talk about right now. So here's where we're going with this division here. We're going to do our 2025 offseason recaps and division predictions. So for the Detroit Lions, we're going to start there. We're going to go in finishing order. So we are going to start with Detroit. So obviously they were one of the Super Bowl favorites last preseason. And the Lions were facing the reality of being a team with expectations for the first time in a long time. In the regular season, they delivered on those expectations in a big way, looking like an absolute juggernaut the majority of their games. Ben Johnson toying with people, right? Just in some of these games, just really having his way with the opposing defense. But once the playoffs came around, they got unceremoniously bounced in the first game that they played by the upstart Commanders, breaking the hearts of a fan base that spent months confident that they would at least be celebrating an NFC championship sometime soon. So we talked about the Ravens a little bit last week. Similar situation for the Lions going into this offseason. It was hard to see how they could materially improve to move past the divisional round other than having a better game plan and maybe not running up against a really freaky, fun, good team. And so they did make some moves, though. And so let's talk about those moves. So let's go to offseason recap. And let's go with their notable additions here, and let's talk about who they added over the course of the year.
Yeah, so notable additions. They added one of my favorite DBs in the league. I think he is criminally underrated and has kind of been overshadowed. They got DJ Reed from New York. I would argue their best corner. Maybe a hot take. I know Sauce just got his whole extension with Garrett Wilson and all that, but DJ Reed, I think he'll be good there. He's a good fit. And then they really are trying to shore up that front seven because last year they had a lot of health issues along the front seven. So they bring in defensive end Marcus Davenport as well as Derek Barnes. I believe they re-signed him. But as far as the departures go, few more names on this side. So they lose Carlton Davis, but I think they upgrade with DJ Reed there. They lose Darius Smith. Who was kind of a half-season rental there and just didn't really pan out for them. And then they lost Kevin Zeitler to free agency. Not listed right here, but they also lost a few guys to retirement, such as Frank Ragnow, and that's going to be a huge impact. So the offensive line is definitely taking a hit. And then also they lost both their coordinators, which cannot be understated. That is usually pretty devastating for a team when you lose that many high-end coaches. So it's going to be an interesting season for the Lions, to be honest.
Yeah, so this offseason, definitely eventful for the Lions. I agree on DJ Reed, Seahawk legend. I think that he is really underrated. He was underrated by Seattle, for sure, in the offseason after he spent the season with them. He was underrated by them, for sure, letting him go. in that case was I didn't think was something I wanted to see at the time. But they were sort of a team in kind of a negative space at the time, so didn't really know what was going to go on. So getting rid of him was more of a favor to him than anything else, I think, at that point. But yeah, so I agree with that point on DJ Reed. I think he'll be a great improvement for their secondary. And so at least they have that to look forward to. But as we will with every team, we want to give some X factors for what is going to impact this team the most for over the course of the season, what's going to determine if they can live up to their expectations. So we'll start with Drew on the X Factors section.
Yeah, so the Lions have had an interesting couple of years. They 2 years ago were kind of the like surprise team that had a really good year, went all the way to the NFC Championship game, had a big halftime lead against the 49ers, and then obviously blew that. And then last year they had some expectations and they pretty much met them, at least for the regular season. They had a great year, and then a disappointing end in the playoffs. And so I think what the X factor for me is it's not a player, it's not a coach or anything like that. It's the vibes. Because the NFL is a very hard league to be successful year in and year out. The Lions, obviously, they would have liked a Super Bowl championship in there, but you can't argue that they have been a successful team the last 2 years. They have pretty strong players in every position group. You feel good about a lot of the players that they have. So the question to me is, can they keep the magic going? I think they've lost some of the maybe bandwagon fans that they've had, and I'm not saying bandwagon Lions fans. I'm saying the fans like us who have other teams that kind of pick little teams to root for here and there that are kind of exciting.
Yeah.
I don't think they're that team anymore. I think now they officially have expectations, and it's what are they going to do with them? They've had good vibes the last couple of years. Can they keep that up? Can they still win all these football games? It's a very hard thing to do, like I said. And can they finally have that playoff success they've been seeking?
Yeah. And I mean, I totally agree with you with the vibes. It is hard once you are officially the team that's been at the top for a little bit. Like you can have the magic run like you talked about, and you can be one of the fun stories, but staying there is difficult for sure. For me, though, for the X factor, I think it's just going to be this offensive line as a whole, and more specifically at the center position. Frank Ragnow, for those of you who aren't like real football fans, who know the ins and outs of great guards and centers in the league, Frank Ragnow's been that dude. He has been a top three center since he entered the league, and he's been that every year. And on a lot of bad Lions teams, he was really great. And so for him to retire, and retire fairly young too, I believe he was only like 29, which for offensive linemen, usually you can get a few more years out of them. And for him to retire alongside them losing some of their guards, like it's going to be interesting to see how this team, who was built on kind of bully ball at the end of the day, they loved to run the ball 40 times a game. And when the Lions knocked us out of the playoffs that one year, they literally just ran the ball. Like that, we went into overtime and they ran the ball. They didn't pass the ball once, and that's kind of the team that they've been built to be. So for them, I'm interested to see kind of how they replace the interior of their offensive line, because obviously, Penei Sewell is going to be great. Taylor Decker's awesome. He's getting older, but he's still awesome. But the interior is going to be interesting, and Goff historically struggles when you get pressure up the middle. So we'll see.
Yeah, and I think the offensive line's performance is only going to be sort of uh, even more highlighted, and the absence of someone like Ragnow is going to be more highlighted with also the new offensive coordinator, right? So there's going to
Yeah.
be something of a new way of doing things on offense for the Lions than there has been the last few years, and the absence of a veteran presence, especially at the center position, that doesn't. It's not something you want. You don't want your coordinator to switch and for kind of a little bit of a philosophical change to come in the offensive side of the ball, and you lose your veteran center. That's not two things you want to happen at the same time if you can control it. But of course, You have the opportunity to retire at 29 with your health and enough money to go. Can't blame him for doing it. The best to him. But yeah, it's definitely going to be more highlighted with all of the different changes that have gone on with the Lions over the course of the offseason.
Yeah.
So look, all of this to say, the Lions should definitely be a Super Bowl favorite to enter the year. Concerns around the durability of the offensive and defensive lines, though, and of course, like I mentioned, the turnover at both the coordinator positions are two big things that could stand in the way of Detroit's championship aspirations. So I think for this team, it's a lot more. It's going to be a lot more mental, right, this year than almost even physical. Can you survive the turnover that the team's gone through? The turnover that they staved off last year, by the way. Last offseason, they should have maybe lost one of those two coordinators at some point, but due to whatever factors happened, they both stayed and they got another year of continuity. And unfortunately, they couldn't capitalize on that. So, we'll see what happens with the Lions this year. As we'll kind of talk about, this division could still be tough this year, like top to bottom competitive. So let's go ahead and talk about another one of the teams in the division here and go to Minnesota, the team that finished second last year. So something of a surprise last year in Minnesota. They left behind Kirk Cousins in favor of Sam Darnold over the last offseason, which raised a lot of eyebrows around the league at the time. The move paid off, though, in the regular season, as Kirk Cousins did have a down year, and Sam Darnold had the best year of his career under the direction of Kevin O'Connell. So that was during most of the regular season there. However, when the lights did shine the brightest, the offense kind of died, which led to their loss to the Rams in the wild card round. So going into the offseason, the Vikings had a good-sized cap figure to work with. They had some holes to fill on both sides of the ball. So let's talk about how they filled those holes and which players they filled them with, and talk about their little offseason recap for the Vikings.
Yeah, and let me just add, for Viking fans out there, it's got to be crazy frustrating. They lost to two teams. Every other team they beat, they lost to the Lions and they lost to the Rams. So that is it's a crazy season to end that way. But as far as the offseason recap, we've got guys. They went out and signed Will Fries, the guard from the Colts, on a disappointing Colts team. He was quite good. They signed Jeff Okudah. He would have been great in Seattle. They signed Jeff Okudah, kind of a low floor, high potential type of guy. He was drafted really high, so we'll see if they can kind of bring it out of him. Brian Flores is obviously a very good defensive coordinator, so we'll see if he can get the most. They re-signed Harrison Smith, who production-wise may be on the decline, but I don't think that can go understated for how important that is for this team and kind of the defense. And then they signed Javon Hargrave, and they re-signed Aaron Jones as well. So a lot of really productive guys getting signed and extended over in Minnesota. Then on the flip side, however, they lose Seattle legend Shaq Griffin. They lose,
and now current again,
yeah,
Seattle Seahawks.
And he's back. Actually, I forgot about that.
He came back.
They are losing Stephon Gilmore, who had his ups and downs last year, but he's kind of an aging star. And then they lost Cam Robinson, although he was kind of a rental because Christian Darrisaw went down. And then they let Sam walk in the offseason. So, they are handing the reins over to essentially rookie JJ McCarthy, and we'll see how that goes for them.
Yeah, I think something I want to say about you bring up Harrison Smith. It reminds me of one of my greatest hypocrisies of all time, which it's not necessarily one for one, but it's pretty close. Where people would talk about oh, Harrison Smith and Earl Thomas, they would compare them, and I'd be like, what? Are you nuts? Are you kidding me? And then the argument that Harrison Smith has for him is the longevity, right? And I was like, no, Earl was way more productive during his time. He was better. And then I go ahead and flip the other side when people talk about Bobby Wagner and Luke Kuechly. I'm like, no, Bobby's better because he has longevity. Who's still playing? And so it reminds me of one of my great hypocrisies is that I immediately discount the longevity argument when people talk about Harrison Smith and Earl Thomas, and then I use it for my advantage when I talk about Bobby Wagner and Luke Kuechly. It
Well, we
makes me
appreciate
laugh.
the vulnerability.
Yeah, I understand my shortcomings, if anything else.
We're honest here
But
on Dingers and Stings.
exactly. And that was a little related to what we were talking about, so I thought I'd mention it. All right, so let's go into X factors, and who is going to be, an important player on this team to help Minnesota reach its ideal heights.
Yeah, I mean, I want to first say honorable mention to JJ McCarthy, who has not taken a
Oh yeah.
snap in the NFL. Uh, Dallas did challenge us by saying, try not to pick the quarterback or the coach, which is fair. But I need to point out on this team, the quarterback is a major X factor because they have a really good roster, and we just don't really know what to expect from JJ McCarthy. I was not high on him out of college, but seems like they're putting a lot of faith in him, so we'll see. But my real answer is going to be Byron Murphy Jr. and really the secondary as a whole. But he stood out to me as someone who he was in his sixth season last year and made his first Pro Bowl. Far and away the best passer rating against that he has had in his career last year. And so it seems like they're counting on him to be the number one option at cornerback out there. And so it's basically, was that a fluke or is that who you are now? Because if that's who he is now, then I feel really good about the Vikings and their secondary and their success as a whole. If that was a fluke, then they've got some holes to fill on defense. But I think they got to feel good about their chances. I mean, going 14-3 last year with a quarterback who was kind of seen as a journeyman, who had a great year, and I think you got to have some hope if you're a Vikings fan.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of banking off that, my X factor is just the defense as a whole, which maybe is a little bit cheap, but last year, I think that more so than Sam being good, and this may be coming from someone who watches a lot of, Sam's games, more than Sam being good, I was surprised by how good their defense was. They were one of the best pass rushing units in the league, doing it on the backs of guys who were both kind of discarded from their teams. Their secondary was solid. And I mean, they were still getting high level production out of guys like Harrison Smith and undrafted linebacker Ivan Pace. And so my X factor for them is if they're going to be able to keep that up because they had some investment in it. They brought in Javon Hargrave, they brought in Jeff Okuda, re-signed Smith, but can they do it again? Can Andrew Van Ginkel be a star player in the NFL, game in and game out? We're going to find out. Same kind of vibe as you said with Byron Murphy. It's a lot of guys who last year had their first true star seasons, and are they legit or are they not? Because I think at the end of the day, the offense is the offense. They've got a good offensive line. They have the best receiver, in my opinion, in football, and they've got a solid run game. They've got an athletic quarterback. So I think, JJ McCarthy's the GOAT at OTAs, apparently, best of all time. So
Right.
they've got a lot going for them. But this defense, I think, is really going to be the make or break for them.
Yeah, and you look at that defense and it could be, the benefit of a third place schedule last year for a defense that's clearly better than third place. But they're gonna, have some offenses on their schedule this year. I mean, they have all the offenses in their division, which are all, playing at their highest capacity, very good offenses. And then they also have teams like the Eagles. They also have teams like the Ravens on their schedule this year. The Commanders are on their schedule too. And so this defense is going to be tested in a really, really big way this year to see if they can do something similar to their performances last year. And
Absolutely.
so we will definitely see what this defense is made of this year, I think, as they take on a little bit of a tougher schedule this year as far as opposing offenses are concerned. To wrap up on the Vikings here, they did address some of their most pressing needs, to be sure. We talked about those defensive needs. They had that nice, about $100 million cap figure to work with, and they made it work for them. And so the determining factor for the Vikings, of course, to repeat and exceed last year's success will be hitting on that JJ McCarthy bet. They let Sam go in favor of starting this guy, and so hopefully he can be that guy. And the upgrades they made to their O-line and secondary will pay dividends. This is how that Vikings team gets back to where they were last year for sure. So moving on to the next team in this division here, the Green Bay Packers are who we're going to talk about next. So they overcame a lot of adversity in the 2024 season to scratch and claw their way to a playoff spot. Malik Willis had to step in at one point for the injured Jordan Love, who took a spill in week 1. And then Jordan Love, when he came back, was operating at kind of a percentage of his full strength for most of the year. It was a little bit of a disappointing season for Packers fans. They kind of imagined themselves in that second place spot, I think. If they were being sort of, that was sort of the realistic take. Obviously, you want to win your division, but people outside the building kind of had them as the second best team in the division going into last year. And so going into the offseason, they were well positioned to make the improvements they needed. But I guess the question that we'll ask is, did they make the improvements that they needed? So let's talk about their offseason and recap that, those additions and departures there.
Yeah, so as far as the additions go, Aaron Banks, the guard from San Francisco, he comes over and kind of gives them some good depth there along their offensive line, which over the last few years has gotten notably thinner than we're used to seeing the Packers have. They got linebacker slash safety kind of hybrid combo guy, Isaiah Simmons, one of the biggest disappointing, defensive players drafted in recent history, in my opinion. I thought that guy had all the talent in the world, and he has been pretty much nothing in the NFL. They bring in Mecole Hardman to go along with 8,000 receivers that they drafted. They get Nate Hobbs from the Raiders, who another very underrated DB. And then they brought in Brandon McManus, who I think that might be the most impactful signing on this list. Very subtly, the Packers, since the downfall of Mason Crosby, have had like one of the worst kicking situations in the NFL, and it's a tough place to kick in come second half of the season. So getting a guy like Brandon McManus, who over his career has been very reliable, he can kick
Super
from
Bowl
distance, Super Bowl champion.
Absolutely.
I think he will be quite impactful there. And then as far as the departures go, really the only notable ones are A.J. Dillon and Jairi Alexander. Impactful, probably, but at the same time, Jairi Alexander could barely stay on the field, and A.J. Dillon truly wasn't on the field. So how impactful will their departures actually be? Who's to say?
Yeah, Alexander was part of that sort of disappointing outing for the Packers defense last year. I think that was more so than the offense because of all the injury they had to deal with. The defense was a little bit more disappointing than them because they were kind of what is the people that I trust were considering a sleeper unit last year, the Packers defense, and it just did not turn out that way for them. And the secondary was the big part of that. And then last week we talked about kickers a little bit last week because the Ravens, of course, are not going to have Justin Tucker moving forward. And we talked about how for a team like the Ravens, not having a generational kicker could help them be more like a team we wanted to see, which is a team that, say, they're on the 45-yard line, it's 4th and 4. We like to see a team like the Ravens with the people they have try to go in those situations and be aggressive. You don't have the legendary leg anymore. It could benefit you. I think for the Packers, we saw that be the opposite thing. They didn't have a kicker last year for most of the year that they could rely on, and it was really the reason they lost a couple of their games. And so the addition of Brandon McManus here, I think, is, as far as additions of kickers go, I think one of the more important ones. It was an important position to address for them. But let's talk about some other important positions, the X factors for this team. Let's talk about who's going to step up and lead this team to where they need to get to. So we'll start with Drew there.
Yeah, so for this unit, I chose Lucas Van Ness, who in 2023 was a first-round pick. I believe it was 13th overall. And in the last 2 years, he has not started a game, and he's played I think every game, but he hasn't started, and he has 7 sacks in his 2 years playing, and I just feel like a first round pick like that. On their depth chart online. Looks like he's slotted in to start this year. I think they need to pressure the quarterback more. I think that was a big problem for them last year, and I think you come in with first round pedigree, you gotta step it up a little bit. It's kind of a make or break year, in my opinion. Your third season in the league, you haven't really put up much in your first couple. Um, let's see what you're made of now that you have a starting job. And I think you nailed it, Dallas, when you were saying their defense is a big reason why they ended up getting third place in this division. And obviously, still a playoff team. There's still a lot to like about this team as a whole, but I'd like to see more from their defense, especially their defensive front.
Yeah, absolutely. The defense was disappointing as a whole for sure. I mean, Jaire Alexander, not more than like a year ago, was talked about as being one of the premier shutdown corners, and now he was kind of thrown away and signed a prove it deal, 1 year deal with the Ravens. So it'll be interesting to see how this Packers defense kind of steps up. But I think at least the most public, and I do agree with it because it's how the Packers have seemed to build their team of recent. Is the fact that last year, publicly, Josh Jacobs came out and said they don't have a true number one receiver. And that ruffled some feathers. That brought the attention to, Jaden Reed and a couple of the guys in that locker room who were not super stoked with that comment, which obviously that makes sense. But their team admittedly has no wide receiver one. And that's why they spent so much this offseason, both in draft capital and going out and signing guys. Not saying Mecole Hardman's a wide receiver one, but going out and just getting as many receivers as you can. I think they drafted 3. And so they're just trying to have as many receivers as they can come in this offseason and see, is any of these guys going to step up and become like a true number one? Because when it came down to crunch time in the playoffs and in some of those late season games and rivalry games, their offense would really kind of falter. They had a run game for outside of a few, injury stretches. They had great tight ends, but they had a lot of receivers who I think were overall, you would say, disappointing last year. So I think, if they can have one or more of those guys step up, Jordan Love, you might be my fantasy quarterback for a second year, because last year was tough.
Yeah, it's funny because I like a lot of these wide receivers kind of individually. You see different things you like. But when you take them as a unit, it's like, yeah, there's not a true number one, and you wouldn't put them amongst the best wide receiver units in football. And yeah, so I think I agree. Someone needs
Yeah,
to step up there.
it's an interesting situation because truly I think the Packers, it's like they have a great offense in theory, and yet the Packers, in my opinion, are also one of the easier teams to game plan for because you can pretty much take out any of their receiving threats. Like there's no one that you're just like, oh God, like he's just going to be running it up and down on us. It's like you're kind of hoping their wide receiver 2 or 3 or 4 steps up and makes some plays. So it's not really where you want to be as a receiving group.
And it's been a hallmark of the Packers teams we've seen growing up and throughout the years when they've been successful. They've always had at least one really, really good receiver.
Absolutely.
Kind of part of their identity.
Yeah, and we'll stay on the offense here for a second. I want to ask this. A lot of people by now kind of have made up their minds about Jordan Love. I don't know that I have. Have you guys landed somewhere with Jordan Love where you think like it feels like people have made up their mind and they either think that he's destined to be mid forever, or they think could be one of the best 5 or 6 quarterbacks in the NFL like any year now. So like, where do you guys land on Jordan Love right now? Do you kind of see him as that? Like, where are you guys at on him right now?
I think if I had to give him, kind of a grade or like a tier at this point, he's near the top of the list when it comes to quarterbacks who don't elevate the players around them. and he's one of the lowest when it comes to like an elite tier or like an upper tier quarterback. I don't think he's mid. I don't think he's bad. I actually think he's really talented. But unless he proves us otherwise, he doesn't make the guys around him better, really. He can capitalize on great play from other players, right? I think he has all the talent in the world that if they had a great wide receiver, he could feed them the ball and make them great. I truly believe that. But I don't think he's going to take a bunch of guys who are kind of underdogs and turn them into some great team. I think they're going to, at his best, he can carry a team like that to being average. But also at his best, with great talent around him, he could be awesome. So I think he is a little bit more product of the system than great player, but I still think he's good. Um, yeah, I'd rather have him than you know, a lot of players in the league at this point, than a lot of quarterbacks. So
Yeah, I would say my mind is not made up on him because this is going to be his only his third season as the starting quarterback of the Packers, and I know he's already gotten paid and he's been around for a while under Aaron Rodgers, so he kind of doesn't he seems a lot older than like C.J. Stroud's about to start his third year, Bryce Young's about to start his third year, so I would say as a Packer, if I was a Packers fan. I'm optimistic about him. I think he has a lot of talent. I wouldn't feel bad about him whatsoever, but I also don't feel as good about him as guys who have been around longer or guys who are younger.
yeah, and plainly put, I think there's an argument to be made. He's the best quarterback in the division. Like when you look at this division, I think there's absolutely that argument to be made.
He might be the one you
So
trust the most in like a crunch time situation. Yeah.
right now, potentially. So yeah,
Yeah, I think if you're talking about like a neutral roster, yes, like on any old team, of this division, I think I agree with that. Um, and so yeah, look, is another going to be another year of LaFleur and Love trying to make it happen. They're betting on their core from 2024 to stay healthy and play to their potential in order to succeed this year. Marginal improvements were made, but they're really relying on better injury luck and a bounce back performance from their defensive unit.
yeah.
And those two things will determine the fate of the Packers in 2025. So rounding out the NFC North discussion that we have going on this week is the Chicago Bears. And one of the busiest teams this offseason, and for good reason. We said at the beginning of this episode, they won 5 games last year, which is not good. Not the amount of games that you want to win. And the team was really, really just putrid last year. They've almost completely reformed it. Their offensive line was one of the most porous in the league last year. Their defensive line lost confidence quickly, and their entire defense really lost confidence quickly as the year went on. And new quarterback Caleb Williams was not set up for success in his debut season. All that changed this offseason, though, and the Bears don't want to wait any longer. They are trying to make this team competitive right now. So let's talk about the moves they made in order to try and make this Bears team this year competitive, and let's recap their offseason.
Yeah, I mean, you weren't kidding with them just fully rebuilding this offensive line from the ground up. They went out and Ben Johnson likes to run the ball. We talked about that with the Lions. They were kind of a bully ball team that was offensive line built and kind of built out from there. They went out and they rebuilt the entire interior of their offensive line. They went out and traded for Jonah Jackson from the Rams. But 1 year previous to that, he was a all-pro guard for the Lions. They go out and get Joe Thuney, one of the most reliable offensive linemen in the league, has proven to basically be able to play all 4 of the offensive positions aside from center. Notably of the Chiefs, has been one of their best players of the last few years. And then they also got Drew Dahlman from the Falcons, who sneakily is one of the better centers in the league, and specifically in the run game. So they've really invested on that offensive line. And then to go out and get Grady Jarrett from the Falcons as well, another sneaky good player who at his best is a incredible pass rushing defensive tackle. And they ran that out with a defensive end whose name I'm really gonna fudge here, but Dali Odeyingbo, um, who fits in that 3-4 scheme that they're hoping to play. And then obviously they brought in Ben Johnson. They got the prized, jewel of the ball, and they went out and got the guy. He was the most desired head coach, or coaching prospect, I should say, of the last like 3 cycles. And finally, they lured him away from the Lions. As far as departures go, they got rid of some offensive linemen. That's essentially it. They got rid of essentially the offensive line.
Addition by
So
subtraction there a little bit.
100%. I mean, they've spent some decent draft capital on their offensive line over the past few years. Some of them have been okay. Some of them definitely have not been okay. And they got rid of the ones who haven't really been okay.
Yeah. So it was very clear that, Ben Johnson got his priority was the offensive line. He got that taken care of. The front office was behind him to get that taken care of. And so, nice job recapping the offseason there. But let's talk about who's going to step up for this team and go to our X factors. And we'll start with Drew again.
Yeah, so Matt, you said it already, but Ben Johnson coming over from the Lions, he loves running the football. I think Ben Johnson is a huge reason why the Lions were good at the offensive side of the ball the last couple of years, one of the best. But I'm concerned a little bit about the running back room that he is going to have. And so to me, that's the X factor. DeAndre Swift and Roschon Johnson last year didn't show really anything special. DeAndre Swift has bounced around the league a little bit. And then they drafted a 7th rounder, I believe from Rutgers, Kyle Monengay. I don't know exactly how you say that, but there's not a name there that you're really drawn to. And we know Ben Johnson likes to run the ball. I think the improvements to the offensive line should help, but at the end of the day, you need the backs to do their job. And I think to get the most out of Caleb Williams, you also need a strong run game. I like the receivers they have. I really like the potential of Caleb Williams being the first pick last year. I'm really excited about this team as a whole. I think Ben Johnson will be a great coach here, a great fit. Um, I like I like the Bears. I kind of want them to succeed, but I think I'm going to need to see something from that running back room to really buy into what this team can be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the case in point for what you're saying too is DeAndre Swift played for that Eagles offensive line a couple of years back and really had not much different of a season. Like his numbers weren't that much different than what he was doing with the Bears last year. And so when you look at that, it's you have to think maybe we've seen his peak. I will say I like Roschon Johnson as someone who deep dives into football and college and just the draft process as a whole. He was someone who was notoriously just considered the backup for Bijan Robinson. Um, but when you looked at his underlying, as a prospect, he could have been a really successful guy if he wasn't behind Bijan Robinson. So I would love to see him get some more run there. But similarly to yours, my thing is just the investment into the offensive line. That to me is the X factor because it has to work. If it doesn't, we're going to see the same old same old. And you can pay money to players. That doesn't mean they're going to play well. And offensive line notoriously is one of the position groups that needs the most continuity. They say even when you have one guy missing, it can throw everything off. Well, they got 3 new guys in. So it's going to be a lot of work kind of getting this unit to gel. But if they do, I think we could see a lot of success from the Bears offense this year because Caleb Williams is obviously one of the most talented guys we've seen, but his play style requires good protection. Because if you're going to be a guy who extends and holds the ball for 4, 5, 6 seconds to make the special play, you also need to be protected for 3, 4, 5 seconds, right? Like you need the time to make those plays happen. So I think the offensive line, they can unlock Caleb and they can also unlock the running backs. So we'll see.
I think one question I want to ask is like, do you guys subscribe to the idea of like year two being like the real first year for like a quarterback? Like, the first year, if they're a starter, their rookie year. Like if they get pushed right into the league their rookie year, is that year as important to you as year two if they do bad in year one? Like, because I think
Um,
maybe for me it would be like year two would be more important to me than even year one, even if it's as
I
bad
will
as Caleb's first year was.
I will say this. I think, yeah, you can put a lot of stock into year two. In the same sense, though, I would also say I kind of group up the early years just as a whole because I think year two says more about a coach than it would a quarterback. Because it's true, a lot of quarterbacks, they come in their rookie year, they're kind of thrown into the fire, and it becomes a thing of like, they're just playing on instinct. Like, that's just a football player out there playing football. Year two, they've been coached up. They've had time in the system. They've had an off season, all these things. And I think it actually speaks more towards the coach who's a part of that process. Obviously, for some guys like this, where their coach is fired after their rookie season, it kind of, muddies up the process of where actually are they in their development. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think for Caleb, it's hard to credit last year to what he'll be this year because this is going to be a new system, an actual offensive system, unlike last year, which was so limited. And this is essentially his rookie year in the system. So it's hard to say because he's definitely not a veteran by any means. So he's still learning the NFL, but now has to relearn a new system, which I think will be interesting.
Yeah, I think for me, it's a case by case basis. I think for someone like Caleb Williams, I do kind of discredit the rookie year because so many things were wrong with what the Bears were doing that
Yeah,
it didn't really leave a lot of space for success for him. Um, and now I'm not going to say this is a make or break year for him, but all the ingredients are now there for him to succeed. And so if he doesn't this year, obviously I want to look at the factors. Does the offensive line perform? Does he get the running game? Does the defense do its job? Like these are important things, but I want to see him develop. I want to see him look like the quarterback that was picked number one overall, and I want to see some signs that there's some growth here and like a new offensive mind, hopefully a better offensive mind, a better system, better players around him can unlock a better version of Caleb Williams. And I think if he has another disappointing year, I'm not going to say I'm out on him, but I'm starting to get you know looking at who else could maybe play quarterback for the Bears a little bit. So um, whereas a good year, I think we're like, okay, the Bears have their quarterback for the foreseeable future.
Yeah. Well, look, this division at its highest potential will be very competitive. If all of these teams can play as well as we think they might be able to, I think this is going to be one of the most competitive divisions in football. Kind of like
absolutely.
I mean, it was a little bit last year, certainly at the top. The Packers making a late surge to be competitive in that division a little bit. And so for the Bears, who's to say whether their offseason moves will impact their ability to rise in the ranks of this division, considering how competitive it could be. But the process has been sound thus far, I think, improving the offensive line and securing the year's top head coaching candidate. Um, I will say the combination of ego from Ben Johnson and Caleb Williams, if the rumors and like impressions are to be believed about what these two guys are capable of, it does have the potential to set the team on fire if it goes sour. But if it works out, these two are going to make the Bears, they're going to make the Bears very successful over the next few and many, many years. And they're going to make each other a lot of money over the course of the next many years. But look, we never like to see a team go broke. So here's to hoping for more than 5 wins for the Bears this year. We'd love to see them rise a little bit.
Well,
So let's round out our discussion here by talking about where we think this division will end at the end of the year. So let's talk about our 2025 division standings predictions. And let's start with Drew. How do you see this division shaking out?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think I want to say this is. I think after this conversation, I've determined this is my favorite division in football. I love like it's like, Michigan, Illinois, Wisconsin, Minnesota. It's that Midwest blue collar, like, every team has real football fans, but like
It's the
these are like,
AFC North, but fun.
yeah, like these are like the real football fans that'll sit and watch their team in a blizzard, and these teams
Yeah.
always play each other tough, and um and so I really like this division as a whole, and I like when it's competitive, and it's very hard to predict. And despite the fact that there are fewer games in football than other sports, and there are fewer teams per division than other sports, I always have a hard time predicting these. So that being said, my standings predictions, I think the Packers are gonna take the division this year. I like a lot of the guys they have, and I think their problems, like, I think the worst case scenario for the Packers is not quite as bad as the worst case scenario for these other teams.
Yeah.
Um, I picked the Lions to get second because I just think the roster is so good, but I do think they won't be as good of a team as they've been the last couple of years. I picked the Bears third because I believe in Ben Johnson and I believe in Caleb Williams, and I'm excited to see what they can do. I think they'll be maybe slightly above 500. We'll see if that gets them into the playoffs. And then last place, despite trusting their head coach and trusting a lot of their roster, I have the Vikings because I do not trust JJ McCarthy. And maybe he'll prove me wrong. It could be he just needs to not make mistakes, and that's the difference between the Vikings being good and bad. But I just, compared to the other three teams in this division right now, I don't trust him to necessarily navigate that as a first year starter.
Yeah. For mine, I ended up just switching it up a little bit because just like as we were talking through them, like it really got me kind of thinking. Um, and I'll say I ended up switching my last place team to my first place team. One, because the NFL is famous for this. Almost yearly, there is a team that goes from last place to first place in a division. And, say what you want, it's always hard to predict that who's going to be the team that does it, but it's going to be one of 8 teams because there's only 8 fourth place teams. And of the fourth place teams in the NFL last year, I got to hand it to the Bears, man. They improved in the ways I think are meaningful in a division that within like divisional games is always very competitive. So I flipped here, and I'm going to go Bears finish first. If this offensive line really improves the way that they've kind of built it to, because I loved all three of those signings. I think all three of those guys they got are awesome.
Yeah.
Caleb Williams has the talent. Their receivers are awesome. We're not even talking about the fact that, last year they had a down year because of how bad the offense was. That defense is awesome. And they went out and drafted Colston Loveland, and now they've got, they can run 12 personnel. They have great 2 receivers. They have great 2 tight ends. The run game will be improved. Caleb will have better protection. Like, there's so many things that I see that I think could work. So I'm going in on Bears. Bears win this division. Second, I've got the Vikings because if you ask me, really it's the same team, just you switch out Sam and JJ McCarthy. I love Sam and JJ's unproven, but also JJ McCarthy's just a more athletic Sam. So who's to say Kevin O'Connell can't get similar production, if not better, out of him? I'm going to go third Packers because I love Matthew Golden. I don't know if he's a wide receiver one. I was mad the Rams didn't get him, but I wanted him to be the Rams wide receiver too. His whole thing is that he's fast. So, do they have a wide receiver one on the roster? I still don't think so. And I think that could come back and bite them. And I still think their defense is bad. And then fourth, I'm going with the Lions. I'm calling it here. They will go from 15-2, and I think just the last 2 years, the heartbreak that they've had, the passion they play with, I think it catches up to them. Jared Goff is in the spotlight. He's got the quarterback show going. They've paid a lot of players, so the outskirts of their team are going to get a lot thinner. And I think we saw that be the reason they lost in playoffs is their depth was tested. And I think this is just the year we see maybe some regression with the coaches leaving, the offensive line reshuffled, defenses recovering from injuries. So Yeah.
All right, well, there you have it. Those are our division standings predictions for the NFC North. Let us know yours if you have some in the comments here. We'd love to get you guys involved in the discussion here. Let us know what you think about the NFC North and how you think it'll finish. And so that also does wrap up our discussion on the NFC North, our NFC North preview, another preview in the books. And so another one to come next week. I don't want to commit to one yet because I don't know which one we want to do yet, but another one to come shortly soon. One last thing I wanted to end on for this show, because we did get some news right before we started recording that I think is interesting. And it's kind of a button on something we talked about like a few weeks ago. I had subbed in for Matt, or like I made a stink of this in Dingers and Stingers a couple weeks ago. And so the news that we got was that the executive director of the NFLPA, Lloyd Howell Jr., he resigned as the executive director of the NFLPA today. And I think this is significant for a couple reasons. Firstly, it's related to the story that Pablo Torre broke about a month ago of the case between the NFLPA and the NFL, and the NFLPA essentially accusing NFL owners of colluding to rob players of guaranteed money, basically, of colluding together to ensure that no guaranteed contracts were handed out, especially to quarterbacks, after Deshaun Watson got his guaranteed contract. And more than that, the NFL encouraging owners to do that, to collude and encourage against guaranteed money. Now, it's important to note that the arbitrator did not find in favor of the NFLPA in that case. They did not find sufficient evidence that there was collusion, but they did, in a document, outline a lot of cases where there could be collusion inferred, right? And then today or yesterday, something like that, there was another situation that came up, another case that apparently the NFLPA and the NFL were in arbitration over, that was surrounding the NFL accusing the NFLPA of encouraging running backs to exaggerate their injuries to aid in contract negotiations. And so the arbitrator found in favor of the NFL in that case. And so the NFLPA came under some heat. And that's likely what prompted the resignation of Lloyd Howell Jr. So I think in the context of this whole thing happening, I think the NFLPA was in a really I made my opinion clear that I thought the NFLPA was in a really bad spot with him as executive director because of his past being involved in like fraud cases with his previous companies that he worked for, and then also kind of the shady way he ascended to the executive director position with like the former now president of the NFLPA, who I am forgetting his name. He was an offensive lineman for the Cardinals when he was the president of the PA. But then he was released by the Cardinals and could no longer be the president because you have to be active. And so to stay in the PA in an influential role, he hired Lloyd Howell Jr. as executive director, who then made up a job for this guy to take so he could stay in a position of power in the PA. The idea, of course, being that he would then be the next executive director of the PA when Lloyd Howell Jr. Stepped down. So a lot of corruption in the NFLPA. So I want to know your guys' thoughts, if you have any, on what this could mean for upcoming negotiations. Who you think, if you have any idea about who could take the role, or what the impact of this could be in general.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's so tough because the NFLPA as an idea is obviously supported by, or should be supported by everyone. It's player protection. It's a group that is there to basically represent players, and so I think it's interesting, and it kind of sucks to hear that stuff like that happened in the NFLPA, especially the fact that they had enough evidence to side with the NFL in a case against them. Um, as far as negotiations go, I don't know how it's going to impact it, honestly, because so much of this stuff happens behind closed doors, and really good closed doors, the kind of closed doors that us fans don't really see or hear about. So I don't know how it impacts negotiations because there's stuff like, the fact that they're holding out with the running backs and all that. who's to say that's not happening with other positions in different ways? And there's all sorts of things that could come out of this. But at the end of the day, I mean, as long as the players are getting what they deserve and are also being protected from predatory practice, I don't really care how it goes down or what happens, I think is my thing. Um, yeah, as long as the players are, being done right by, I'm okay with whatever's going on.
Yeah, my take is just, I already think that the league and the owners for any sport, any major sport, are already a little shady. Anyone with that amount of money and power, uh, it's just kind of, it can be assumed
Typically don't
there's some,
get there easy.
right. And so I think it's a real bummer when the Players Association, which negotiates against them, is also shady because it just leaves you vulnerable to, you know,
Both sides.
yeah, like, things can go wrong in so many ways. I would like to see him replaced by someone who's really just, pro labor and pro player and has a clean record and is just a good negotiator and that fights for the players and all that. I hope that's what we get. Um, Most of this conversation is over my head. Like, I don't get into too much of the nitty gritty of the business side of sports very often, but um, it looks like, a lot of drama is going to unfold for the labor negotiations in both our major sports that we cover coming up
Hmm.
within the next few years. So
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah, and just to put a button on this conversation, I think in that great episode of Pablo Torre's podcast where he broke the original story about the original arbitration case, he mentioned that there were some really cool guys who were in part of the interview process to be executive director of the NFLPA when Lloyd Howell Jr. was hired, and so I hope some of those names come up again. For the PA because they were really cool, and I would like to see them be in charge of things from that perspective. And then just the last thing on this is that, it's good to see that, journalism still kind of matters a little bit. I majored in journalism. I believed in it for a long time. And it's good to see that it matters still because this doesn't happen. This resignation of Lloyd Howell Jr. doesn't happen if Pablo Torre and Mike Florio don't find that original arbitration document that was being hidden from everybody and also pushed and buried by the NFL and the NFLPA both. So major networks weren't covering it. They heard about it, dug for it, and dug through it, read through the whole thing, came to the right conclusions, put it out there. And then they also found this other one that came out today. And they did the same thing. They read through all the pages of the legal jargon. They parsed it out. They figured it out, and they put the story out there again. And it made something happen. That ending should have happened. So good note to end on is that, journalism still matters, and the guys who do it, the effort doesn't go wasted. So that'll end this week's football, NFL, whatever you want to call it, episode of Dingers and Stingers. Our NFC North preview was super fun. We'll continue doing those. And if you watch, thank you for watching. If you aren't subscribed to us yet, please subscribe below. You can follow us on Instagram at Dingers and Stingers. And until next time, take care, and we'll see you then. Bye.
Bye.